Good morning, folks. We'll go ahead and get started right at the top of the hour. Until then, sit back, go and enjoy a cup of coffee, and we will talk to you all at the start of the hour. You're likely to hear me chit-chatting with the panelists as they come in, but we will get started with the actual session right at 9 o'clock Mountain Time. Chris, I've promoted you to co-host, so you should be able to, oh, wait a minute. No, I think I got the wrong one. Hang on. Now I got you as co-host. Sorry, I grabbed the wrong person. You're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I can do that sometimes.
Hey, look, that mute button has saved my life more than once.
Yeah. Getting things set up.
Looks good. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that you're going to introduce yourself, but if you want me to do anything, tell me.
Nah, it's okay. We can introduce ourselves.
Yeah. Hey folks, Chris and Kay will go ahead and get started on the session in about, well, now 4 minutes, but right at the top of the hour. So they'll start right at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. Until then, we're just sitting here, and I think we're all enjoying our morning coffee here in Colorado and trying to avoid looking out at the snow because it should be springtime. I was just spending a moment being grateful for smart home technology that let me turn up my thermostat from my phone.
There you go. Yep.
I would also say I am grateful for the cat who decided to sleep on my feet.
Yeah. Get you pinned down.
Just enough to keep my toes warm.
Well, exactly. It's like, who needs slippers? Got a cat. Testing. Hopefully people can.
Yeah, so far I've only heard from one person that can't hear anything. Of course, who would know if they couldn't hear other things?
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, there's Eric
I'm
saying.
trying to. Okay, thanks, Eric. There she is. Kay's joining right now.
Yeah, I just saw her. Been assisting and admitting.
Oh, thank you. Wondered why it was going quickly.
Yeah.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Oh, getting ready.
Stretch.
Can I stretch? Can we do that?
Well, you can.
I don't think so.
Let's see. There.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and leave it to you, and okay. I will continue monitoring, letting people in, but you guys deal with the presentation.
Sure. To help Kristen feel warmer, I switched to a warmer background.
Oh. Okay, we got a minute, and we want to thank everybody for coming.
Yes.
And we're about to start.
Get started. The last few people come in. All right. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Chris Luchs, and I am Associate Dean of Career Technical Education and Mathematics at CCC Online here in Colorado. I'm also a doctoral student at Old Dominion with Community College Leadership. And with me today is Kae Novak. And she can introduce herself.
Yeah, I will introduce myself. I'm just seeing about getting some people in. I was just looking at getting people in. That's all I was doing. So yes, I can introduce myself. Hi, I'm Kae Novak. I'm an instructional designer at Front Range Community College, and I'm also a doctoral student at the University of Colorado, Denver. And I would like to, thank everybody for coming. And I'd like to ask everybody how they are. And you can go ahead and you can type that in chat. And, you know, here's the thing about it. I would ask who's working remotely, but I think at this point in time, everyone is working remotely, right? And I just wanted to say, yeah. Oh, Eric Thompson just waking up. What's that about, Eric? Come on. we started over an hour ago with the morning show.
Of course.
And what we have up here is a tweet, and this is from about 2 weeks ago, and I think it's probably like my favorite tweet out there so far. And it's hashtag dreaming beyond COVID-19. And the thing of it is, I'm seeing, especially the participants today, the attendees, that we have a lot of people who have been in online learning for quite some time, okay? And, you know, a lot of things that people are thinking are like miraculous, like Zoom meetings, right? We've been doing these kind of meetings for a long time. And I just wanted to say is, you know, while we have a lot of people coming into our world and thinking about remote, think about what we can take out of this and maybe how we can move online learning forward. Because a lot of times online learning doesn't move forward because we hear from a lot of people about the barriers, okay? Well, in our session today, now this is based off some research that both Chris and I have done in our doctoral programs about, you know what, maybe barriers aren't the worst thing for students. Maybe we want to design for dilemmas and other problems like that. So go ahead and next slide, Chris. Now, this is actually full disclosure. This is from my advisor, who you can come to the discussion session that we're doing afterwards on this about trauma and care in a time of remote. And even though you might be seeing that hashtags everywhere, online learning, online teaching, remote teaching, pivot to online, that again, it's really about our students. And last but not least, this is another reference we're putting out there. Has anybody, and you can go ahead and type in chat, has anybody here seen the series on Netflix called Altered Carbon? It's a biopunk series. If you have, put it why. Oh my gosh, so many people are saying yes. That is making me so happy. And the reason why is the picture that we have up there is actually of an artificial intelligence, AI, that runs the hotel that has taken on the persona of Edgar Allan Poe. And despite this being an artificial intelligence, this character in the Netflix series is one of the most human and human appreciating characters in the whole series. So I just wanted to put up this quote from the second series, that in this impractical time, the hellscape of a world, or like us, you know, practically the apocalypse, that there's a book, a name, a chicken soup, person, or a student to remind us that life is still to be savored, okay? So I thought that was such a great quote that we put it up there. Now, next slide, please. Okay, what I'm also bringing up is a Metagame Book Club, is a book club that Chris and I do with Sherry Jones and a bunch of other professionals. So if you ever want to jump in on it, please do. The next book we're reading is actually the series Altered Carbon. So next slide, Chris. Okay, now here's my next question for you. How many people have read the book Ready Player One, or seen the movie, or have an 11-year-old or a 13-year-old, or at this point in time a 19-year-old who this was their favorite book ever? Okay. Oh, Kai.
I don't have a favorite book ever, but yes, read it and saw it. Yes.
Okay, maybe not your favorite.
Several times, yes. For
okay,
both, yes.
But and William Wheaton. Okay. Now the thing about this book is, this book is all about learning, and if you read it through an educator's eyes, first of all, the main character is in a virtual school. In fact, all students are in virtual schools at this point in time. Kind of sounds familiar. Now, their virtual schools are not just Zoom meetings and then you go into an LMS. Their virtual schools are rich, beautiful virtual worlds. And the thing of it is, when it comes to designing for dilemmas or deliberate difficulties, or designing for students online, or even face-to-face, let's start thinking about the rich experiences. And if you have to, go back to the classics. go back to the books. Okay, Ready Player One, excellent book that talks about what online learning could really be. Ender's Game, another great example. Altered Carbon. Oh, and there is an anime series too called Resleeved. You can get that on Netflix too. And I don't think that's spelled exactly correctly, but The Martian. The Martian is an awesome book to go back and look at and think about all the learning that happens there. And I'm trying to think of the exact quote from the main character in The Martian. It's something like, he's constantly like, do the science, do the science, do the math, do the math.
Do the math, do the science.
Yeah, exactly. So please, so please go back to these for inspiration and for dilemmas and deliberate difficulties. And oh, the Diamond
Yes,
Age
the Diamond Age. Yep.
by Neil Stephenson. Don't even get us talking about Neil Stephenson. We love Neil Stephenson. We've done his books for the book club because they are so good. And like Pirate Accounting, Chris, that's like one of your favorite. To use pirating. Yes, thank you, Jane, for the exact science the hell out of it. Thank you for the exact quote. Okay, so what I'm saying is go to our classics, go to our science fiction, go to our 15 minutes in the future things to give us inspiration when it comes to designing. So next slide. Okay, so what I'm giving you here is an example that we built from Ready Player One. Now, you might have seen the movie, or you might have seen the cover on the book about what the different, what the stacks look like. Well, this was my version of it. And sorry, the reason why it's pink is because I put some fluorescent on it that changed the color from pink to blue to things like that. And we went ahead and we built this in a virtual world. And we're going to say, despite it being hard, whether it's in Second Life, whether it's in a VR world, a virtual reality world, whether it's an OpenSim, go ahead and start building. Start making it so it looks like this rather than a text-based LMS. So next slide, please.
All right, so one of the things we're looking at is what prompted this presentation. So as we're going ahead and looking at things and how we wanted to go ahead and get started and look at it, is one of the things we were thinking about is both of us working in community college. One of the things we really look at a lot is universal design, user experience. For those of you that this might be new terms, I don't think so, just based on some of the comments. But universal design is the design and composition of an environment. So it can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. User experience, the process design teams use to create products that provide meaningful and relevant experiences to users. And so these are really sort of things that we revolve around as we're going ahead and thinking about designing our classes. And these are all wonderful things that we're all trying to do to really help out our students and really help our students be successful. And accessibility is very much front and center. It's very much something that we're doing. One of the challenges, though, I think that we find ourselves is that we're focusing so much on making sure that we're hitting all of our benchmarks on this, that what happens is that these benchmarks become our ceiling when it comes to designing our actual learning material, as opposed to just becoming something that just should be ubiquitous, something that should be just part of how we think, something that should be just part of everything that we design. This just becomes what we think that this is what everything should just be, this one thing, as opposed to going, wait, this should actually be something that's always included in everything that we do. And then looking at how do we go beyond just hitting just our benchmarks, and how do we actually go ahead and keep and surpassing that to making sure we can keep on going on. So how do we access and how do we assess scaffold for higher level cognitive skills and expectations while still achieving our standards? Because sometimes what it is we bump up the accessibility standards, we put that in the forefront, and as opposed to saying, no, this should actually just be part of our normal everyday thinking.
And what we want to do with this session is asking you to think more. Okay, think. And I know yesterday when Spencer gave us the poll during the keynote, and one of the options was mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, and we not a lot of us said that was what we were working on. Spencer was like, "Oh, I'm surprised," and here's the thing, I'm not surprised. And I would love to be in virtual reality. It's just not where our colleges, our universities, our schools are letting us go at the moment. And it is a matter of resources. It's a matter of, as Lori mentioned, having the Wi-Fi, having the bandwidth, having the computers. And so for this session, what we really want to do is we want you to be advocates. We want you to ask for it and keep asking and keep asking. And I will tell you, when I'm in online learning meetings, I suggest something, and then I hear about the barriers to it. And then in my head, I go, you can run, but you can't hide. And then I wait a year or two, and then guess what? We're adopting it. So all I have to say is I've seen a lot go to fruition. And with this session, we're saying, let's go ahead and let's ask for more. Now, some things that are out there that are already waiting for us is an example, Second Life here. Okay, next, Chris. If it's not Second Life, then the next one, OpenSim. OpenSim's out there too. You can build things in. World of Warcraft. We've done projects in World of Warcraft. Keep going, Chris. Minecraft. Okay, a lot of K through 12 schools. Minecraft all the time. In fact, they're bringing it in kindergarten even. Oh, and I threw this one in because the latest Animal Crossing, and I'm just going to ask, is anybody playing Animal Crossing, or anybody in their family playing? And Soph asked how you choose the virtual environment based on the learning outcomes or end goals. Yeah, it's whatever matches up. And quite honestly, like the reason why Animal Crossing is in here, I'm not currently using it for a class. Now, I have read about someone who is using it for a class, but it actually, it's a bit of a pared down Photoshop at this point in time. I could, in our system, we have an intro to multimedia and graphic design. I could definitely introduce this along with Photoshop. So when choosing the learning outcomes, for me, it's really easy. I like this environment. I'm looking at the tool that allows you to do as much editing pretty much as Photoshop. And so I would introduce it as a tool. So that's how I look at things.
And for me, and especially in career technical education, the term we use is epistemic frames. And so if you do a literature search on that in the academic literature, you'll be able to find some really good articles on that. And there are a lot of epistemic frames, especially in business, economics, pretty much, and even in anthropology and sociology, even in the humanities. It's really looking at what is the frame of practice or that you're trying to really sort of simulate. And a lot of these games will have it. Like, so for instance, I've used World of Warcraft in accounting. I've used World of Warcraft in business. I've used it, we've worked with other colleges in their system to use it for economics classes because they have an in-game market where actual players are buying and selling commodities and trading them back and forth. So there actually is a lot of market interaction. And so that's really sort of what you're looking at, is you're looking at where are students struggling, and you're framing that within the game. And then when you're creating assignments, it really is impressing upon the students going, it's not necessarily about gameplay, we're really zooming in and narrowing down on this particular aspect of the game. Because you're right, students can easily get lost in a commercial off-the-shelf game. like World of Warcraft, doing all of everything else that's in the game. But like what we did for World of Warcraft is we just had them create business plans that really sort of narrowed down on the business aspect, and then they executed that over the course of several weeks. And then they created financial statements, and then they presented their results to the class and did a reflection on the business aspects and what they could have done better as a entrepreneur in that environment.
Okay. And so I was asking, did they present through virtual worlds? Yes, we've had students present through virtual worlds. Now, the focus for this presentation is based on a literature review of the research that we really did on this, that we did on transformative learning. So our focus for this session really is this transformative learning portion. And this portion, what the theory says is if you want students to look at something new and critical, you put them in a new and critical situation. And next slide. And what we're really looking at is that first one, that disorienting dilemma. And the disorienting dilemma is in the transformative learning paradigm. Learning is triggered when a learner is faced with this disorienting dilemma, which is an experience that does not fit within a pre-existing meaning structure. Okay, so it's not easy. It's hard. It's something they haven't dealt with before. Okay, and it, you know, it makes them pause. It's topsy-turvy, and it evokes a critical self-reflection. And because of that self-reflection, and anybody who does reflections in their class, you know, just let us know in chat. So you have the disorienting dilemma. You just don't leave it there. You have the students do an essay, or you have them do a discussion, or you have them do something else where they can examine that so that they could go ahead and figure it out and make meaning of it. So that's why we're asking for a disorienting dilemma. So go ahead, hit it. Next slide. And it allows them to question assumptions, and it lets their perspective be transformed. Now, this is very different, say, than competency-based learning. Okay, this is very different than, say, math homework managers. We're suggesting you use this in classes where you will have students dealing with the affective domain. So next slide, Chris.
And just one quick thing is when you're starting to use this, we'll echo back to what our keynote yesterday said during lunch. What Sherry said is that it really is important as you, as the educator, if you're going to use these games, you're going to use these environments, you have to be comfortable and you have to use them yourself first. And then that way, that's how you find those epistemic frames. That's where you make those linkages. That's where you find these disorienting dilemmas. That's where you find these pieces and these transition pieces within those games that then you can pull out for your students and focus on them.
And these are some questions just for you to go ahead and think about as we're doing the rest of this presentation, and also to take with you when you're designing your own courses. You know, how often have you experienced a disorienting dilemma, say if you've gone into a virtual world or a game? This happens a lot. Virtual worlds and games are great for this. And now compare that to how often you experience that in an education setting. A lot of our educational settings are very rote. We're focused on, well, let's make the navigation the same for each thing. Let's make the user experience same, absolutely same. And that's good for ease of use, but it might not be the best way for your students to learn your content. And you can go to the next slide, Chris. The other thing that we want to mention is, what about a desirable difficulty? Go ahead, click, Chris. This is purposely making things a bit more difficult. Now, the research, especially the memory research and language learning research, is that Difficulties are desirable. If you want students to learn, if you want students to remember things, that if things are very easy for them, the chances of them recalling it aren't as high. So we're also suggesting perhaps you'd like to add this to your courses. And we put it in discussion questions here, but I think we're just going to continue on, and we'll take some discussion questions more towards the end, Chris.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so what we're going to show you now is we're going to show you something we designed. Okay.
Bardo.
Yes.
Bardo Toto. So this was built for a world religions class, East. And so you can read the description here. I won't necessarily read it for you. So you can go ahead and read through that real quick. But this course is obviously for world religions. And really the students struggled with a specific part of the course. And so we worked with one of our friends, and actually Kae worked with this instructor and then brought myself and a few others. This was on board to sort of say, well, how could we brainstorm and think about how could we go ahead and make this scenario more realistic or more relatable for students, because, you know, specifically the issue was looking at the transitional process, and particularly this idea of liminality, this liminal process, the idea of that's a transitional state. And this is within the reincarnation process. So you're occupying a position both at or on both sides of boundary or threshold is the definition of the liminal.
And the thing of it is, with this world religion class, most of our students had a Judeo-Christian background, and the in-between state, the Brahmin is Atman and Atman and Brahman, was a pedagogical problem that the instructor was having, trying to get students to go ahead and understand this. And the students who were taking this course actually were a lot of pre-nursing students, and they were taking it as a global competency, and we're from Colorado. We have a lot of people who do not have, you know, who are not Christian, who are in our healthcare places and are in our hospices, and our students need to know how to administer to students who did not come from the same background that they came from.
And so this is one of the things we did, and it was interesting that it just happened to come about. There was an instructional innovation grant that came out at the time, and so we all collaborated on it, and we received the grant to be able to do it. And it was funny because as we were filling it out, like one of the justifications was like, well, why do you need this to do it this way, and why using this virtual world and building it in Second Life? And you know, sort of creepily, we're like going, well, you know, because the only way for students to really, you're sort of talking to each other, we're like, well, the only way to sort of students experience this would be, number one, they would have to convert to this religion. Number two, they would have to die to experience it, and that would probably be bad for student retention. So really the only way to actually go ahead and have them experience it is in a virtual environment. So you had to go ahead and go through this. And so we went ahead and we built the Bardo. And
okay. Yeah, I'll take it. Okay, so for Bardo Tolo is we created a disorienting situation. We created a disorienting dilemma. Students came in using a character or an avatar that pretty much looked like Gandhi. Okay, pretty much looked like Gandhi. It did not matter if how the students identified gender-wise. Everybody got the same avatar. So that was one of the first thing that was disorienting for them. They weren't able to choose, they weren't able to customize or anything like that. And so the student was called Noble One, while the instructor was the Lama or the guide. We had the students when they first came in, they came into a box. We built basically a box. And when you build in a virtual world, you couldn't see the box. All you could see was that it was dark. So their character entered this dark area. They couldn't see anything. And then we opened one portion of it where there was some light, and the students had to choose to walk into the light. When they walked into the light, they were greeted by the peaceful deities. The peaceful deities are heap praise on them. They go ahead and they tell them how wonderful they were in their lives, how they were so missed, and just how they were the absolutely best person they could possibly be. Okay, so students aren't used to that, so that's one part of it. Then students after that, and this was in basically the same space, so avatar wise, the students didn't have to walk much at all. Then the wrathful deities showed up, and basically what we did here was we changed the backgrounds, we changed the coloring, yeah, and the wrathful deities came in. The wrathful deities did the exact opposite of the peaceful deities. They told them how they would not be missed, how they were horrible people, how their situation was that they were not the kind, wonderful people that they thought they were. Now, again, this is a disorienting dilemma. Now, for the students in this scenario, yes, and Noah, thanks for coming. Noah, it was super simple, okay? It was super simple. It didn't last more than 15 minutes. The students came in and they experienced this whole thing. And the only way for the students to actually win in the game was to not do anything. To not try to run away, to not get flustered, to accept that you would be dealing with both wrathful and peaceful deities in Bardo.
We had what? I think we had about 150 students went through the whole thing, and out of all of that, I think only one student actually just went in, and as soon as it shifted over, they just sat down.
Yeah,
and they totally ignored everything else.
And I will tell you, yeah, Kristen played some of the deities, and so did Brandon.
Yep.
Okay. A shout out, because what they were characters. So we had our different people logging in to help create this disorienting dilemma.
Yeah, we have about 7 different playable characters in the background. So there's a big group of us in a computer lab, all logged on at the same time. And Second Life on multiple avatars. We're all controlling different avatars, running around, doing things. So it was very labor intensive from the design side and from the staffing side, but it was really fun because you got to play around and do a lot of stuff. But from the student side, like I said, and the instructor was just serving as the guide. And as the guide, all the instructor was doing was just reading off the actual text that the student had read in class. So they would actually just simply read the mantras and just be reading what Tibetan Buddhism was teaching. They'd just be reading the English translations over and over and over again, different passages.
But what we're really saying about designing for is putting the students in a kind of situation that changes their perspective and then makes them be able to reflect.
On to Lord Yama. And so then after the wrathful deities, they would end up meeting the Tibetan accountant, Lord Yama. So Lord Yama is the god of the afterlife, who weighs good acts and evil acts. White and black stones basically on a scale. And there's his wonderful Haruka. And basically what happens is the soul is weighed and judged. And what's interesting is that the players were given the choice. They were given cards. They could choose choose whatever card they wanted. They picked the teleport, what they wanted to do. Again, at any point in time, they could just go ahead and ignore. However, and depending on where they picked up, depends on where they ended. And sometimes they could end up being reincarnated. And it's up to you to decide and up to them to interpret how they came up, whether it was an egg.
Okay, so what I was going to say here is that this was a quick 15-minute thing. At the end of it, in Second Life, there is a text card that can be dropped. Students would then have to pick from the text card one of the 6 different realms that you could be reincarnated in, and they were written in Tibetan, so the students, unless they were Googling really quickly, they could not know which one. And the example here was the animal realm. And so if the students picked the animal realm, they ended up in something that looked like this. And like we said, we didn't define it. We didn't define it as if when they ended up in this chicken coop, if they were another chicken, or if maybe they were the worm in this coop. So besides giving them an avatar that looked nothing like them and putting them in that situation, also at the end, they got to pick which realm they were to be reincarnated in. Now, after you have students do this, you really have to have that reflection afterward and that debriefing. Okay, so what happened was they ended up writing an essay. They ended up, this was an online course, they ended up having to talk about it in discussion. So the students really got to think about this different perspective. So this is what we're encouraging. Maybe not as elaborate, but thinking about how can you put your students in a disorienting dilemma. I mean, seriously, it sounds like the exact opposite of what any dean you have would want you to do. Okay, but think about how putting a student in this new kind of situation where they don't have a toolkit to handle everything, where it's not just a matter of them having to do something by rote or just do it over and over again till they get it right. Think about designing, even for your online course, a situation that puts your students here. Now, this is a virtual world, right? I will tell you, you can go ahead and even do this in discussions. You can do this with an evolving scenario in discussions. It's just putting your students in something that they've never been in before, and then taking them through it, guiding them, being that guide on the side, and then doing the debriefing and reflection.
And the other thing that I just typed in is that one of the interesting things whenever we were reviewing, whenever their reflections were shared with us, is that the students also reported hearing sounds and remembering images that were never actually part of the game.
Yeah, so, that is like, we're like, where did they get that? We didn't put that in there.
Yeah, they're like, remember screaming and whips and chains. We're like,
and we were like,
never use that imagery or sounds in any of our stuff. So it's kind of interesting. So we just wanted to sort of, again, let everyone have some time to sort of think about what are some of the dilemmas or disorienting dilemmas or difficulties you're thinking about as you're listening to us talk about. What are some things that are sort of been percolating in your heads as you've been listening? So feel free to drop some ideas down in chat. If you have any. Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the things that we've talked about is since we've done Bardo is that, you know, with the avatars, that we didn't quite have the ability to manipulate the avatars as much as we would have wanted.
And Sophia said, imagining a virtual environment for historical wars or moments in time that change culture or lives or values. Yeah, absolutely. Putting students in a situation where they have to reflect and review and not take things for granted. The Spanish Inquisition. I will tell you, we went on a quest kind of looking for games that would do the Spanish Inquisition, and we could not find any. Like, because at one point I did have an instructor who wanted the Spanish Inquisition, and we could not find a pre-made, but I would love to build one like based on that. And Kristen, I think you're absolutely right. Like the fuzzy instructions, yes, and not defining everything, because quite honestly, you want your students to do critical thinking.
Yeah, situational social work students can approach a dilemma from the perspective of families living in poverty. Exactly. Good ideas.
And Tiffany, that's something actually for the doctoral stuff that I'm doing that I'm really looking at, and because really the big thing is, there's been some writing about it, but not a lot of research about how not to create like false empathy. So with that kind of thing, it's really about authenticity, and for me that's something that I'm really puzzling over to get that authenticity. And from Edith, simulating a nurse leader situation such as COVID-19, I think absolutely, Edith, I think that absolutely we're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing this in the future, because these are the kind of things we want our students to reflect on. And we got science classes being in charge of the immune system, trying to combat a virus.
Yep.
Oh,
and so,
oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, Sophia said about psychology class that explores the brain and neurons as action potentials. In Second Life, there's still a build called Virtual Hallucinations, and it's a build that was developed to allow folks to experience what it's like to have schizophrenia. And it was built with whispers and different images and different things like that. So there's a lot of different things that are there.
I think it's still. I think the
Freud site still is still there. I think, Rebecca.
Okay, so Chris, I think we're gonna have to go fast with the rest of them.
Okay. Oh, I can talk fast. Oh no, not me.
So Chris, I'd say move forward.
Definitely. So some of us are already hits on this part as well. So there are a lot of resources out there, but some possible starting points. If you're looking to go, how do you want to go ahead and think about possible starting points for these dilemmas, for these things, actual unsolved cases, some things we've used in the past, DB Cooper. We've used that. We did a mashup between accounting and criminal justice in the past, of getting those two together, look at DB Cooper, how they would solve it or how they would be DB Cooper and avoid it. Murder mysteries, puzzles, favorite movies, popular culture, current events, thing that's going on, looking at policing, looking at ethnicity and different implications. Even with COVID, there's lots of different things going on. It's coming out now and looking at the data, and you see that. Other things to remember as you're thinking about these things. The 3 F's, fun, flow, and fiero. Yeah. Hard fun. This is really about, we love the games that basically abuse us the most. So, it rages the most. This is a wonderful article from Scientific America that tells us that. Oh, go ahead, Kay.
Oh, I was going to say, and it's easily accessible. You can show it to everyone. You don't have to dive into it, through a research article to find the quote. Scientific America did it. And Chris, I can take some of the next ones so we can go really fast, because we're going to have to. The metagame, a lot of these games have a lot of information outside the game. And a lot of things students have already done. Yeah, Kristen just told me 10 minutes, so we're going to go fast, Chris.
Right.
Go ahead.
So these include add-ons. So these could be like measuring performance. They could be playing a better player, how to do guides. It could be embracing the suck, hard fun, dying a lot and trying to be successful. It could be building, frustrating building, creating patterns so that way people line up. It could be flow, being completely involved. So this is cheeks up the high. It could also be when you lose track of time. So this could be with a book, this could be building, this could be playing games, it could be listening to music, it could be perfecting your perfect line dance animation with your friends. It could also be looking at playing with your avatars. So this is a site that's a complicated thing. How you see yourself, how the rest of the world sees you. It could also be about picking the right killer in music. It could be about coming up with strategy and tactics. It could be coming up with Fiero. This is the fist bump. So this is Enkman and Mezirow.
Okay, I'm going to jump in right here.
Go.
Just because we see this in, okay, for me, helping instructors design escape rooms. I have had a lot of instructors who, when students are struggling with an escape room, they want to give them hints. Don't give your students the hints. It ruins it, okay? It ruins it. First of all, it's better for your students not to solve an escape room or not to solve the puzzle and do a debrief after than to give them the hints, because the minute you start giving them the hints, that kills the game. Okay, go.
And of course, it's also sharing your successes with your friends. It's also doing things as groups and teams. It's getting involved with your colleagues, personal accomplishments, both for students and for instructors, and then also sharing those successes. It's also experimenting, because everyone loves failures, even though when we do presentations at conference, we never talk about our failures all that much. We've always talked about doing worst practices. And it's also having a little bit of fun whenever you're doing it. And also, like, when you get done with the conference, sitting around and enjoying your build.
And Kristen just put, hardest teaching skill is to sit quietly and shrug at students. Yeah, that pause. Let that pause happen. Sit there and you know, pull out a book or something. But
exactly, like I can do awkward pauses too. And another thing we do is, like, one of the things that's a great example of this, and this is sort of our last slide, is really one example of this is World of Warcraft actually really sort of does a really good job of this. Is they actually relaunched their vanilla WoW piece, which is the classic WoW, which is probably one of the hardest versions. And it's because people really liked suffering. They liked playing a hard game. And so we actually did an immersive tour with a few folks back in the beginning of April. And so it's a lot of fun. And for that, we'll go ahead and open up questions for folks. If anyone has additional questions, in the last few minutes that we have.
Oh, okay. So Tiffany, Tiffany, I kind of, okay. Now I know there's like screenwriting software out there, right? And there is free screenwriting software out there that you can use to script out all the possibilities. I'm kind of lazy. What I do is I use PowerPoint. I use PowerPoint slides, and I go ahead and I put the possibilities on the different PowerPoint slides. Then I go to like grid view, and I move them around. So in that sense, I'm lazy. Do students complain about? Yes. Edith, students do complain about things being too challenging, and they complain about negative responses. Why, yes, they do.
And they complain, and they have complained about having to go into games. I've had students complain about games and tell me they're not gamers. And then that's when you have the discussion about epistemic frames and go, it's not about gameplay. It's about you showing me and demonstrating me that you are mastering these critical course concepts and constructs, and you're exercising it in these scenarios.
And I will say, the research that I've dug into to just about role playing in general, role playing games in classrooms, students, when surveyed, when asked, do you prefer role play or would you prefer a lecture? Students choose lecture. It's passive. But the results of students comprehending and retaining are higher if they do role play. So students will complain. So, and I know it's difficult for us. Sometimes like 2 or 3 students' complaints will be enough. Like, oh, students complained, I'm not going to use that anymore. Don't. Here's the thing. You will see the results. You will see if they are comprehending things, if they're learning things faster, if they're learning things more thoroughly, and if they are, then stay the course. On epistemic frames, yes, I'm trying to, it's Schaefer.
Schaefer.
Schaefer, and I'm going to say it's 2006 is when he starts talking about this. And
Computers in Education, Epistemic Frames for Epistemic Games. I just pasted the article link in the chat. Yeah,
Schaefer, I think he's still at the University of Wisconsin. He was the person who started doing the research on epistemic frames and a lot of epistemic frames. And I will tell you, with one of my friends and colleagues in microbiology, we use it a lot actually for epidemiology. Yeah. Even though they're pre-nursing, pre-med students, we use the epidemiology framework a lot as justification for why we're taking the students out of the classroom to look at things. So we are just about done now. So any additional questions?
Yeah, this is me, and because I can unmute myself and I have nobody else is asking a question. You've shown, and I've seen the Second Life and World of Warcraft. I'm just dipping my toes into actual VR, like the Oculus Quest, the Vive, those things. Are people is there a VR space that this sort of thing is taking place in? And if so, what VR space is that?
Well, okay, so as far as the VR spaces, people are doing it more building like their own individual boxes. And also, I saw Noah Glasser in here just a little while ago, and he's doing his dissertation on using virtual reality. So if he's still on here in chat, I would tell him to please jump in and to give comments. Right now, what I was going to say is some people are playing with co-spaces. There's a thing called co-spaces. It's more K through 12. When it comes to VR, the VR social spaces, that would be like the equivalent of Second Life. Right now, they're a bit clunky looking. They're a bit like Pez dispenser looking. Oh, and I see Noah's there. So if he has any comments, go ahead. Right now, I would say we don't have it yet. Sansar is a place that you can go and start building that gives you the community, but Sansar just got sold, so I'm wondering what's going to happen with it. And we will continue the conversation of VR and virtual worlds in education. We do need to find a good VR space that we can do the kind of things that you can do in Second Life that are very community. So we're going to go ahead and end here, and want to thank everybody. Okay. And sorry, Noah. Yeah, different Noah. Sorry. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, all.